This video lecture is going to explore the role of play in early childhood. Play for children in this stage is significant. It's essentially what they are made to do. Hutchinson, who wrote our textbook, actually put a quote in there which I think sums up really well the role of play. She says, "The young child loves to play, and play is essential to all aspects of early childhood development. Essentially, play is what young children are all about. It is their work." And I just think that's so powerful, especially in cultures and societies that put a large emphasis on productivity and performance at a very early age. It's a really good reminder to step back and think about where exactly children are and what is going to be best for them developmentally, not necessarily social, like in a way to make the family or the child look great to others. It really brings it back to what the child needs, and it can help us kind of readjust our focus on things. So when we're talking about play, obviously our stages span multiple years, so early childhood is 3 to 6. Play at the beginning of the stage is going to look different at the end of the stage. And so this slide kind of walks through different types of play during different ages. So at the beginning of this stage, children are really engaged in imaginative play. Fantasy play is a huge component of early childhood, especially at the beginning. So kind of using the imagination and making up stories and doing the make-believe things. And so often the play at the early stages involve a lot of props. So doctor kits, dress up, makeup, different types of things to transport kids into that fantasy play. Similar to that, miniature toys or replicas of like gas stations or stores or houses pull the kids into imagining that they are part of that reality, and are able to continue to build some of that imaginative play around that. Then there's the art materials such as paintbrushes, crayons, markers. They're really starting to engage in developing of their fine motor skills, which is using like the fingers, the hand-eye coordination, more of the involved movements. And so introducing art materials in the beginning stages lets children start to develop some of those skills in a very basic way. So when they transition to the middle stages, you start seeing more of like the vehicles, riding bikes, riding different trucks, still kind of tied into imaginative play, but becoming a little bit more advanced. And then continuing to have activities to encourage those fine motor skills, getting a little bit more advanced than the beginning stages. So instead of just having paintbrushes to do whatever with, there's a little bit more of that like hand-eye coordination. We're stringing beads, you're sewing, you're creating things in a very smaller scale versus a larger piece of paper. Adventure books are also common in this stage. So books are great to increase language and cognitive abilities. And so the adventure books can, again, link towards that fantasy play and transporting them to a different reality. And then in that 5-year-olds, towards the end of this stage, they're really fine-tuning their fine motor skills. And so able to cut with scissors, they can color inside the lines, they can make complex creatures or whatever with Play-Doh. Again, using imagination with the Play-Doh piece, but they're really able to do more specific things versus activities like in a broader scale. And they also like to engage in play that develops the cognitive skills. So having a workbench or playing cards or the board games. And so forcing the child to start thinking critically, playing by rules, have problem solving skills. That's all functions of the cognitive skills. And so playing games and engaging in those types of activities kind of set children who are in early childhood up to transition into middle childhood, where some of those functions become even more important. So I've identified, with the help of the textbook, 6 primary functions that play serves for children in this life stage. So we'll go from the top, the opportunity to explore reality, down to the bottom where it's the route to attachment to fathers. So first, exploring reality. So essentially this means that it's allowing children to put on different hats, that they can kind of test out the waters of through make-believe, being a doctor, being a teacher, a mother. My 3-year-old is obsessed with princesses. Actually, she was at daycare today, and she's wearing her Sleeping Beauty full ball gown complete with shoes. I made her leave the crown and wand at home. But she's engaging in this different reality where she, in fact, is Princess Aurora, and she gets so much joy from that. I am slightly mortified when I drop her off at daycare, but such is life. She's happy, and it's exactly spot on for her developmental stage. I have to remind myself of that. So it gives children a chance to kind of look at things differently, kind of try things out, and really build their imagination. Play contributes to cognitive development. I kind of mentioned that on the last slide, especially as they get into some of those more advanced, not advanced, but the later stages of this life stage. They are able to engage in activities that stimulate that. So the board games, like I said, you're learning how to think critically, you're learning how to play by the rules, you're learning what the social norms are around play, so taking turns, often going clockwise in turns. And so it's increasing a skill that's using the front part of the brain, which is really key in being able to do more problem solving as an adult. Books obviously are a huge piece of cognitive development as well, and as well as language development. So having kids engage in reading helps expand their vocabulary and gives them increased literacy around that. The next one is practicing the morality. And so imaginative play can often involve like superheroes and bad guys, or cops and robbers, so kind of the good versus bad. And so much of the moral development right now is looking at good versus evil, and children wanting to be good and not wanting to be bad. And so there's kind of modeling where their moral thinking can be modeled into play by use of kind of that imaginative play, and then kids not wanting to be associated with the bad, and that can give them motivation to adhere to social norms and not push people and play in turn and be respectful of others. And so it gives them a chance to kind of test the waters of morality and kind of start viewing themselves in relation to others. It's the opportunity to gain control. Kids in this stage are starting to transition out of that infancy and toddlerhood where they're dependent on their caregivers or others to take care of their needs. And now they're starting to try to figure out how to be autonomous and how to have their own person and their own personality and their own sense of being. And so play can be an attempt to gain control in that. And so that can be demonstrated in how their imaginative play goes out. The textbook gives a really funny kind of story about how one of the researchers was observing a preschool classroom, and the teachers had told the students that they weren't allowed to bring toys from home because it caused a lot of chaos, fights. You didn't want to lose them. You didn't want kids to get jealous. And so the researcher observed that kids started taking smaller toys that could hide in their pockets as an attempt to take control back from the adults. We'll talk about control a lot as we get through stages, and kind of the importance of having security and control and the feeling of ownership over a person's life has on mental health and well-being. And so it's interesting to see that present already in these early stages. The fifth one is engaging in a shared experience. And so we are going to find as we go through these developmental stages that peer acceptance and the perception of peers becomes significantly more important as we get into later stages. In these early stages, we're still kind of looking at family as the main social influence, but it is really actually starting to show a little bit of peer influence as well. And so being able to play with their peers is kind of, again, another step into getting into that autonomous thinking and breaking away from just being part of their family. Some interesting observations that the textbook had made, that research shows that females tend to gravitate towards a smaller one-on-one type play experience, and boys gravitate towards more of a large group experience. That is not consistent over all cultures, but it was present in some of the more Western cultures. And so I just thought that was interesting, in that you kind of can observe that being consistent through different life stages. It also kind of speaks to the type of play different genders engage in. Females tend to be more one-on-one, kind of like serving tea, having tea parties, playing pretend in that capacity. And boys tend to gravitate more towards the physical play, which then can be present in more of a larger group versus just one-on-one. And the final role of play, and I think this is really cool, is it's a way to help encourage attachment to fathers. And so we talked a lot about infancy and toddlerhood, the attachment and bonding that mothers have with children. And some of that is just inherent because the mother's physically caring for the baby during their pregnancy. There's the breastfeeding component. There's some of the social perception that mothers are the primary caregivers during infancy and childhood. And so oftentimes father attachment isn't always explored or looked at. So I thought that was kind of important to look at, that if fathers are struggling to attach to their children, play is a perfect way for them to engage and kind of start to increase some of those bonds and sense of safety and connectedness. Often they did mention, kind of similar to the last one I shared, that play with fathers often gravitates more towards the physical play, but doesn't always have to be that way. But there's a lot of benefits to having that physical play, pushing children out of their comfort zone and having just a shared experience of fun with their fathers. One thing to take into consideration when we're talking about all the different types of play is, first of all, this is the main point I wanted to say, was that we live in an age of technology, and kids are exposed to technology at a very, 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 very early age. And so does technology have a benefit to play, or does it hurt it? And I think that there's kind of both sides of the coin in this. Technology can open a lot of doors to language and learning skills. You think about, there's like YouTube Kids has a lot of educational videos, and honestly, my 3-year-old Quinn learned how to count and most of her colors and a lot of stuff that I never taught her. She learned it from watching shows on YouTube Kids. I was dead set on being a mom that didn't have children watching technology, but here we are. If you've watched the videos of Quinn that were posted earlier in this assignment, you can see her. She knows the concept of TikTok because she has older sisters. She has watched and observed and viewed that, and technology is not actually part of her imaginative play when she pretends that she's dancing in front of the screen and then has to post her TikTok. Slightly mortifying, but also I find to be very hilarious. Some downsides to technology is if kids are in front of a screen, what is that doing for brain development? There's still growing literature about that because it's a relatively new area of study, but some of the lack of activity when kids are sitting in front of the screens and not going outside and play. It can also increase some isolation if they're just watching a screen versus going out and engaging with others. So it's something to keep in mind and observe. I don't think technology is going anywhere, so it's going to be part of the discussion, I think, moving forward, but it does definitely play a role, both for the good and the bad. So that's everything really I wanted to discuss on play. Just kind of taking away from this that this is really what a child should be engaging in during this life stage is play, 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 not work, work, work necessarily, because there's so many developmental benefits to being able to engage in play.